What if I told you that being, profoundly out of shape is mathematically just as dangerous as smoking cigarettes?
Yeah, or living with something severe like coronary artery disease.
Right. But then on the flip side, if you push yourself to the absolute physical limit to fix it, well, you might actually destroy your nervous system.
It creates this really fascinating biological paradox. I mean, we are constantly told to find moderation, right? To stay in this Goldilocks zone with our health.
Exactly, just right in the middle. But the stack of sources we're looking at today paints a wildly different picture of human survival and, well, physical limits.
We have a massive, I mean, absolute behemoth of a cohort study published in JAMA Network Open. And this focuses specifically on cardiorespiratory fitness and mortality.
Yeah, and we're pairing that clinical data with some really incredible deep dive insights from Healthline and Tune Up Fitness. We're looking at the underlying science of physical burnout.
And how to hack your body's recovery systems, which is just entirely counterintuitive.
It totally is. So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore the absolute limits of human fitness. We want to understand how it affects your longevity and uncover the secret to safely reaching those extremes without, breaking down.
Basically, everything you thought you knew about the necessity of taking a rest day is about to be flipped on its head.
Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand the ceiling of human potential, we first have to look at the methodology of that JAMA Network Open study. Because the way they gathered this data completely changes its reliability.
Right, because historically, a lot of studies on physical activity and mortality rely on self-reported questionnaires.
Exactly, which is a huge structural flaw in the data.
Yeah, which basically means researchers are trusting people to remember, or frankly be honest about, how much they actually exercised over the past decade.
And let's be real, if I'm filling out a survey, I'm probably going to round up that 20-minute walk to, like, a solid hour of intense hiking.
Oh, 100%. We all have that recall bias. We view our habits through a very forgiving lens.
Right, we want to look good on paper, but this study completely bypassed human memory. The researchers followed 122,007 patients over a median of 8.4 years.
Wow, that is a massive timeline.
It is. That's
Yeah.
1.1 million person years of observation. And instead of surveys, they put every single patient on a treadmill and conducted objective exercise treadmill testing, or ETT.
So they aren't asking how fit you are. They are physically pushing you to exhaustion in a lab to measure your peak METs, your metabolic equivalents.
Exactly. They are measuring the strict scientific volume of oxygen your body can utilize when the physical demand is at its absolute highest.
That's incredible. So there's nowhere to hide. You either have the fitness or you don't.
Precisely. And from those treadmill results, they stratified all 122,000 people into 5 performance groups based on their age and sex.
Okay, what were the groups?
They had low, below average, above average, high, and then this really ultra-specific tier they labeled elite.
Elite. That sounds intimidating.
It is. To qualify as elite, a patient had to score in the top 2.3% of their specific age and sex group. That is the 97.7th percentile and above.
Wait, I actually need to push back on this before we look at the results. Haven't we been told recently that there's, like, a U-shaped curve to exercise?
Yes, the U-shaped curve theory.
Yeah, I feel like the narrative has been that if you run too many marathons or push your heart rate too high too often, you actually cause myocardial fibrosis like scarring of the heart tissue.
Right, or that you trigger arrhythmias.
Exactly. Essentially reversing all the longevity benefits of working out in the first place. You damage your heart by trying to save it.
It's a very common concern. Those earlier observational studies definitely raised alarms about extreme habitual exercise, specifically regarding atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat, or the calcification of arteries.
So the assumption was basically that the heart is like an engine, and if you redline it too often, the parts just wear out faster.
That was the fear. But because the JAMA study used clinical treadmill data rather than self-reported habits, they found something completely different.
Really? What did they find?
There was absolutely zero observed upper limit of benefit when it came to overall survival.
Wait, none at all.
None. The U-shaped curve simply did not exist in this data set.
That is wild.
It's game-changing. The elite performers, that top 2.3%, they had the lowest risk-adjusted all-cause mortality of anyone in the entire study.
So they didn't hit a ceiling where the benefits just dropped off?
Not at all.
No.
They statistically beat out even the high performers, the people sitting in the 75th to 97.6th percentiles.
Oh, wow.
The data actually shows that the risk reduction of being an elite performer versus a low performer equates to an 80% reduction in mortality.
80% reduction. I mean, if you were sitting in your car listening to this, and maybe you jog twice a week and think that's plenty, this data is a serious wake-up call.
It really puts things into perspective.
It does. Because an 80% reduction in mortality is comparable to, and in many cases even greater than, the survival benefits of not smoking or not having diabetes.
Exactly. Being deeply out of shape is a clinical risk factor on par with major life-threatening diseases.
Achieving elite fitness isn't just a hobby then. It's like a biological superpower that insulates you against death from all causes.
And what makes that superpower even more compelling is who it actually applies to. The researchers isolated specific subgroups to see if age or underlying conditions change the math.
Because you'd assume an 80-year-old shouldn't be pushing for the 97th percentile, right?
You'd think so, but they found that the survival benefit between having just high fitness versus elite fitness was actually most statistically significant in patients 70 years and older.
Are you serious?
Completely serious. The narrative that extreme fitness is only for 20-something athletes is entirely false. Even in your 70s, pushing into that top 2% of your age group provides a massive protective barrier.
That is amazing. It's literally never too late.
No, it's not. And that protective barrier extended to patients with hypertension, too.
Wait, high blood pressure. I thought intense exercise was risky for high blood pressure.
Having hypertension was not a barrier to reaping these extreme benefits. In fact, if you have hypertension, reaching that elite level of fitness provided an incredibly profound layer of life extension.
So the takeaway from the JAMA study is glaring. You want to be as fit as humanly possible, aiming for that 97.7th percentile without any fear of a ceiling.
That is what the clinical data supports, yes.
But this brings us to a massive roadblock. If limitless elite fitness is the goal, why can't you just jump on a treadmill and sprint until you throw up every single day? Why do we physically hit a wall?
Because of burnout. If you blindly brute force your way toward that elite tier without understanding how the body processes fatigue, you won't get fitter. You will just break down.
And the data we have from TuneUp Fitness completely redefines what fatigue actually is.
Right.
It does. Most of us assume fatigue is just a local muscle issue. You do a bunch of squats, your quads start burning, and you think, okay, my muscles are full of lactic acid.
All right, you think they're physically failing, I have to stop.
Exactly. But that local muscle burn is only a fraction of the story. The real limiting factor is your central nervous system.
Your brain.
Yes. Your brain and your spinal cord are constantly monitoring the systemic stress you are putting on the entire body.
Let's use an analogy here because this can get dense. Think of your body like a high-performance sports car.
Okay, like that.
The lactic acid building up in your quads, that's just the tires wearing down on the track.
Yeah.
But central nervous system fatigue, CNS fatigue, is like the car's internal computer artificially throttling the engine so the whole vehicle doesn't literally explode.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanism. During intense, prolonged overtraining, your brain senses an existential threat.
It thinks you're dying.
Pretty much. So to prevent catastrophic tissue damage, it diminishes the frequency of action potentials being sent from the motor cortex.
And by action potentials, we're talking about the actual electrical signals traveling down the spinal cord to the muscle fibers.
Right. The brain literally reduces the electrical voltage it sends to the muscle. It refuses to let the muscle fire at full capacity.
Wow.
On top of that, your peripheral nervous system, the nerve network branching out into your limbs, it alters the way it transmits those weakened signals. The muscle isn't too tired to work. The brain is actively pulling the plug to force you to stop.
Which means burnout isn't just a psychological feeling of being drained. You can't just, sleep in on a Sunday and cure it.
Not at all. Burnout is a systemic medical syndrome. The World Health Organization actually includes it in their International Classification of Diseases.
It's that serious.
Yes. When you chronically overdrive that central nervous system, your body enters a state of physiological crisis.
And the stakes are high. We're talking about chronic fatigue, severe insomnia, where your body is literally too stressed to sleep, brain fog, and emotional instability.
Your immune system becomes heavily compromised too, making you highly vulnerable to infectious diseases.
And if you sustain that state of burnout over a long period,
you drastically increase your long-term risks for heart disease, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes.
Which creates an agonizing paradox. I mean, we just established in the JAMA study that you need elite fitness to avoid heart disease.
Right.
But if you try to get there by blindly overtraining, you trigger a nervous system burnout that actually causes the very diseases you're trying to outrun.
It is a vicious cycle. You push hard to be healthy, you fry your central nervous system, your health collapses, so you push harder when you recover, and just fry it again.
So what does this all mean? How do you actually bridge the gap? How do you condition your body to reach that top 2.3% without tripping the central nervous system's circuit breaker?
The answer lies entirely in the mechanics of active recovery.
Okay, we need to clearly separate this from passive recovery.
Yes, that's a crucial distinction. Passive recovery is lying motionless on the couch for 2 days after a heavy leg workout.
Right. And passive recovery definitely has its place if you have, say, a torn ligament, a concussion, or clinical exhaustion.
Absolutely. But for general soreness and building elite endurance, passive recovery is actually detrimental.
It makes you stiffer.
Exactly. Active recovery, on the other hand, involves moving the body at very low intensities. It sounds counterintuitive to exercise when you are tired, but the biology makes perfect sense when you look at how the body clears metabolic waste.
Let's get into the physiological mechanism of that,
Yeah.
because the Healthline source highlights something really fascinating. We always blame lactic acid for that heavy burning feeling in our muscles.
Everyone blames lactic acid.
Yeah, but it's actually the accumulation of hydrogen ions during intense exercise that interferes with the muscle's ability to contract.
Yes. The hydrogen ions create an acidic environment that physically blocks the muscle fibers from sliding past each other smoothly. That's the fatigue you feel locally.
So how do we fix it?
To get those ions out of the tissue, your body relies on blood flow and the lymphatic system. But here is the catch. The lymphatic system doesn't have a pump like the heart.
Right, it can't move fluid on its own.
No, it relies entirely on the physical contraction of your skeletal muscles to push lymphatic fluid through the vessels.
So if you do a brutal workout and then immediately sit perfectly still on the couch for 12 hours, that acidic waste just pools in your tissues.
The filtration system essentially shuts down. Active recovery acts as a gentle vacuum. By moving at a low intensity, you keep the skeletal muscle pump working just enough to squeeze the blood vessels and lymphatic vessels.
Physically flushing the hydrogen ions and blood lactate back to the liver to be metabolized.
Exactly, and doing it without creating any new stress on the system.
Let's connect this to specific actionable modalities, so if you are listening, you know exactly how to apply this. The sources break down a few highly effective methods.
They do. The first is altering how you handle intervals and cooldowns.
So after a maximum effort sprint or a really heavy set of lifting, the instinct is to just collapse and drop to 0% effort.
Which is the worst thing you can do. Instead, you want to drop to about 50% of your maximum capacity.
Like a slow pedal on an assault bike or a light jog.
Yes. That 50% zone sustains the elevated blood flow, maximizing the clearance of that metabolic waste while the tissue is still warm.
Makes sense. Then we have swimming. The Healthline data pointed to a very specific study on triathletes that showed a massive performance boost when they utilized the pool for recovery.
Right. The triathletes who did an active recovery session in a pool performed significantly better the following day compared to those who used passive rest.
And the researchers attribute this to hydrostatic pressure, right?
Yes, hydrostatic pressure.
Which is the physical pressure the water exerts on your body from all directions. It acts like a full-body compression sock.
That is a great way to visualize it. It literally squeezes the fluid out of your tired extremities and pushes it back toward your core to be filtered, all while being completely zero impact on your joints.
Another incredibly popular modality is myofascial release, commonly known as foam rolling.
Yes, very popular.
Wait, I actually have to stop you there and admit something because I think a lot of people make this mistake. I bought the hardest, most aggressive PVC pipe roller I could find because the fitness industry taught me that if it doesn't cause excruciating pain, it isn't working.
That is such a common misconception.
Now, why does Tune-Up Fitness say that's a terrible idea?
Because it completely ignores how the nervous system operates. When you grind a rock-hard piece of plastic into a sore muscle, your central nervous system perceives it as a physical attack.
The threat response activates.
Exactly. The Golgi tendon organs in your muscles trigger an involuntary guarding reflex. The muscle physically braces and tightens up to protect the underlying tissue.
So you're trying to force the muscle to relax, but your nervous system is fighting you, creating even more tension.
It's counterproductive. That's why Tune-Up Fitness heavily advocates for using softer massage balls or softer rollers.
You essentially have to trick the nervous system into feeling safe.
When the tool is softer, the nervous system doesn't perceive a threat. The guarding reflex drops, and the muscle tissue is allowed to actually lengthen and release the fascial adhesions.
It always comes back to hacking the nervous system. The sources also highlight Tai Chi, yoga, and simple walking as incredibly effective tools.
They all accomplish the same biological goal. They gently pump the lymphatic system and shift the body out of the fight or flight sympathetic state and into the rest and digest parasympathetic state.
But understanding the biological mechanisms of active recovery is really only half the battle. The other half is overcoming the psychological barrier that prevents people from actually doing it.
Oh, for sure. The mental hurdle is huge.
We have to talk about the guilt. The fitness culture, and really our modern hustle culture in general, has glorified this no pain, no gain mentality.
We are heavily conditioned to believe that progress only happens when we are suffering.
People feel a deep sense of guilt if they dedicate 45 minutes to a leisurely walk instead of doing a heavy lifting session. They view an easy day as a wasted day.
Tune-Up Fitness introduces a concept here that is just incredibly profound. They reframe self-compassion.
Yeah, which is usually treated as this soft, feel-good buzzword.
Right, but they position self-compassion as a biological imperative. If we connect this to the bigger picture, treating your body with grace on a recovery day is a strategic physiological requirement.
Because it lowers stress hormones, right?
Exactly. When you engage in active recovery, you lower cortisol levels, which is the primary stress hormone. Chronic cortisol elevation actually breaks down muscle tissue and stores fat.
So active recovery prevents that breakdown. It also operates in what we call Zone 1 and Zone 2 cardiovascular training.
Which means keeping your heart rate at roughly 30 to 60% of its maximum.
For anyone wondering what that feels like, Zone 2 is a conversational pace. You should be able to breathe through your nose and hold a conversation without gasping for air.
While it feels easy, the cellular adaptations happening during Zone 2 are profound. You are actively stimulating mitochondrial biogenesis.
Meaning you are physically building more mitochondria, the energy factories, inside your cells.
Exactly. So the next time you go for a maximum effort sprint to reach that elite GEM-A percentile, your cells actually have more factories available to process the fuel and clear the waste.
You are doing the silent structural work that makes extreme performance possible. You are upgrading the engine while driving slowly, rather than trying to fix it while going 100 miles an hour.
That is beautifully said.
So how do we put this all into a schedule for the listener? If you are listening to this and want to build a blueprint for your own routine, how often should you actually be doing this?
It scales entirely on how much structural stress you undergo. If you are a moderate exerciser, someone hitting the gym 2 or 3 times a week for general health, you really only need 1 to 2 dedicated active recovery sessions a week.
So like a long, easy walk or a beginner yoga flow on your off days.
That is perfect.
What if you are pushing hard, like CrossFit, marathon prep, heavy powerlifting?
High-intensity exercisers need to match that stress with recovery. You should be aiming for 3 to 4 active recovery sessions a week, usually on your non-workout day.
And for the pros.
For intense or professional athletes, active recovery is a daily, non-negotiable practice. It is often programmed immediately after the heavy session just to kickstart that parasympathetic nervous system response.
Wow. We started today with a mission to find the absolute limits of human fitness and longevity. And the data from JAMA Network Open is definitive. There is no ceiling.
No ceiling at all.
To live the longest, most disease-resistant life possible, you want to aim for the absolute peak of cardiorespiratory fitness, that 97.7th percentile.
But the biology of fatigue and the very real medical threat of central nervous system burnout proves that you cannot reach that peak through sheer force of will.
The only way to build that biological superpower is to master the mechanics of active recovery. It requires swapping out the guilt of hustle culture for the strategic cellular benefits of low-intensity movement.
It's understanding that the hydrostatic pressure of a gentle swim or the soft compression of a foam roller is actively filtering the waste from your tissues.
And building the mitochondrial engines you need to survive.
It is all about working in tandem with your nervous system rather than constantly declaring war on it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into our sources today. This data completely shatters the old paradigms of health, proving that extreme fitness isn't dangerous. But ignoring your body's need to recover absolutely is.
It fundamentally reframes rest. It is no longer an absence of training. It's the most critical component of adaptation.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question for you to ponder. If the ultimate superpower for a long, disease-free life requires reaching the absolute elite tier of human fitness, and the only biological way to sustain that fitness without destroying your nervous system is through dedicated, compassionate recovery, Could it be that the true measure of your athletic potential isn't actually how hard you can push yourself, but how masterfully you allow yourself to rest?